This is the American side of the border wall, and right behind me are all of the vehicles coming from the Mexican side of the wall. We already have a group being processed right in front of me of about 25 people, and people continue to pour across the border. It's almost 1 a.m. here, and we have seen nonstop activity since we've arrived about an hour ago. So this is the current scene.
With so many issues going on in this nation, it is hard to be up to date and focused on absolutely everything. And one of the issues that has fallen by the wayside in this great nation, in the national consciousness, especially with the recent Supreme Court decisions, is the crisis that is currently ongoing at our southern border. Every single day, hundreds, if not thousands of people are flooding into our nation, and this is due in large part to lax border enforcement policies that are emboldening cartels on the other side of the border and their high-end smuggling operations. But we're not going to ignore that. We're going to dive deep into this issue. We're going to go into the numbers so you have a good perspective on what is actually going on our southern border and how bad it's getting and why you shouldn't be directed away from this issue. But before we get into that, this video is in fact sponsored, so we're going to throw it over to the sponsor and then we're going to talk about the issues at the border on the other side. The hottest temperatures of the year are in fact here, and at this time in particular, with the price of fuel being so high, it's important to be more cautious of your energy uses, which is one of the reasons why I'm happy to report that I'm working with Easy Summer Cool to help you with your cooling needs. This little mini air conditioner is absolutely perfect for me. I put it right by my bed at night, run it, and it blows cool air at me all night long. You just put a little bit of water in the top, and it shoots out the cooled, chilled air at you. Now, I'm told by people out there in my audience that this works best in low humidity environments, so definitely keep that in mind when you're going over to EasySummerCool.com, where you could find a 50% discount for members of my audience. That's EasySummerCool.com. Cool yourself without breaking the bank. So during the 2020 presidential campaign, the Democratic Party undoubtedly campaigned on an open borders policy, even though they did not state that they were campaigning on open borders explicitly. Every single thing that they were advocating for, including decriminalizing crossing the border, thus meaning that they wanted to legalize illegally crossing the border, having all these people released into the interior of the country, not holding children in detention facilities, thus incentivizing people to send their children along this dangerous journey, were all signals put out to Latin America, to people seeking to migrate to the United States, and to those criminal organizations that want to make money off of facilitating that migration. And we are seeing the consequences of this every single day at the border. Savannah Hernandez, who is a good friend of this channel, recently did a couple of border pieces in Arizona where she documented the large numbers of people crossing into Yuma, Arizona, and the variety of countries that they're coming from, because these people are coming from nations that you would not normally expect.
What makes kind of Yuma also unique is the amount of migrants coming outside of the Northern Triangle countries. So you'll see a lot of people from South America, India. We'll see a lot of men from India tonight, Uzbekistan, even Russia. So
now a lot of people assume that people crossing the Mexican border are coming from Mexico, and some people with a little bit more knowledge of the subject matter understand that a lot of these people are in fact coming from Central America. But what I don't think a lot of people realize, and it's something that really struck me as I was watching this wonderful piece by Savannah Hernandez, was the fact that the smuggling operations into the United States through the Mexican border have become so sophisticated that people from India, from Russia, from Europe, from all over the world are gaining entry to our nation from the southern border. And those are just the anecdotal examples. Those are just the individual lawbreakers caught on film from one day when Savannah Hernandez was out there, and the other great people who are out there on the border like Jorge Ventura. There's actually a multitude of other numbers that you can look at so you can get a broader understanding of the scope of the problem since Joe Biden has taken office as the president of the United States. In the first half of the fiscal year 2022, 1.06 million people have crossed the border, and again, that's the first half. In just the month of April, according to a filing from Texas versus Joe Biden, who is suing Joe Biden over his lax immigration policy, 221,000 illegal immigrants entered in just 1 month, April. Now, of those 221,000 who entered the United States of America illegally in the month of April, 80,000, aka more than 1/3, were just released into the interior of the United States. This brings the Biden total as of April, which again, there's more by now, to 836,000 migrants released into the interior of the United States of America just to roam around and do whatever they want as their reward for entering our nation illegally. Now, this is going to lead to a number of problems just by all of these people that there's no way we can vet being let into our country, but it also leads to more problems along the southern border. You see, one of my big criticisms of the Trump administration and their immigration policy is that the Trump administration never made the moral case for strong border enforcement. The reality is that the journey to the southern border of the United States is incredibly dangerous. There are miles of desert, you have to make deals with cartels, women are often sexually assaulted, children can be kidnapped, they can be ransomed. It's a whole nightmare scenario, and what we need to do as a country is have strict border enforcement policies so that we can disincentivize people from going to these cartels in order to get smuggled into the United States. Remember when the Obama administration had that Flores settlement in court and they decided that they were just going to deal with all the unaccompanied minors by letting them into the country? That actually incentivized parents to send their children alone along this very treacherous journey to the United States, which ultimately led to the deaths and the injuries of those children, not to mention all the other victimizations of those children during the course of the border. As a nation, you can feel like we should be sympathetic to kids who show up at our door, but if the effect of being sympathetic to the kids that make it here is that we incentivize a whole bunch more kids to be sent here, a lot more will be lost along the way. That is not a sympathetic policy at all. On top of that, we're emboldening the drug cartels to go into the smuggling business, and they're making a killing by doing so.
All right, guys, it's about 2 a.m. and as you can see behind me, we have more groups coming into the U.S. I'm on the other side of the border wall, and this has been a very active spot all night. Large groups continuing to pour into the United States throughout the night. Again, about 2 a.m. at this point, we have seen consistent activity. When we first got here, we had about 25 people that turned into 150, and then we've been seeing groups of 20 to 50 people at a time making their way across the border, some of them running because they think that they're still in Mexico and they're going to be apprehended by Mexican officials, not aware that they're actually basically on the American side.
For the longest time, whenever we discuss immigration policy and illegal immigration policy in particular in relation to the United States, the border was usually a huge component of that discussion, but it wasn't the whole of the discussion. This is because people typically who wanted to migrate to the United States illegally would do so based on traveler's visas or student visas that they just happened to overstay, especially if they came from countries where they didn't have access through the southern border of the United States. However, Biden's lack border enforcement is so insane and has such damaging effects on our nation that now we're seeing people go through the Mexican border, even though typically with stricter enforcement, they would have been a problem that we could deal with at regular entry points through airways or whatever. But now we're seeing Indian people. We saw that big story of all the Haitians that were camping on the southern border. We're seeing Russians. We're seeing all kinds of people that we don't typically see do border crossings because this has become the most advantageous way to enter the United States. And Border Patrol are basically glorified Uber drivers, as Savannah Hernandez lets us know in her wonderful piece.
And just to give you guys an idea of who is coming here, all the different nationalities, we have some Mexican nationals that have been picking up trash along the border wall. They've picked up a couple of different currencies. So here we have currency from Guatemala. We also have Nicaragua, Russian, Cuban, and then of course Colombian. So just to give you guys an idea of who is coming across the border, these are just some of the many different currencies. We also have people from India that have been making their way across.
One Border Patrol agent told me he feels like an Uber driver now because he says we no longer, protect the border. We just let them basically come in like they're doing now. They're literally going to get on a bus right now and then be taken to a processing center. So there's no longer any border security.
The Border Patrol is even being so kind to separate all these people out by their nation of origin that essentially they're getting the absolute top tier customer service from an agency that is supposed to be enforcing the border and getting these people out of the country. And this is due in large part to the fact that the Biden administration is no longer enforcing policies that were put in place by the Trump administration that made perfect sense, like the Remain in Mexico policy. If you're going to apply to asylum from the United States, if you're saying it's too dangerous in Guatemala or any of these Central American countries, then you should apply for asylum in Mexico before that, because what you're arguing when you're arguing for asylum is that it is so dangerous in your home country that you feel under threat of life or persecution or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you get to go to your first country of choice. You have to go to the next safe country if your issue, again, is safety and not that you're an economic migrant. This policy made perfect sense. It was totally in line with human rights. It also helped people who were actually in danger find a way out of their country, and after they were rejected by Mexico, if they were rejected by Mexico, they could then consider their options of applying to the United States. On top of that, this actually disincentivized illegal border crossings in this nation because it led people to stop off at other nations looking for places to settle, and again, it weeded out some of the people who were more interested in safety than economic migration, thus leading the economic migrants to try to sneak into the country illegally, who we could process more easily. All of this is being undone by the Biden administration. They're trying to get rid of this because they've decided that this policy is somehow racist and evil, despite the fact that it makes perfect logical sense. And by the way, this is due in part to the fact that the Trump administration allowed the Democrats to paint the narrative related to these policies rather than making the moral case, not just for the United States of America, but for the migrant safety themselves, that these policies were sensible. Look, I know there's a lot going on in this country right now. I know a lot of you are more concerned with the price of gas or what's going on in the economy, inflation, the impending recession, etc. But I highly recommend you go over to channels like Savannah Hernandez and look at what's going on the ground. Obviously, I'm only showing you snippets from her coverage of this, but you definitely need to check it out in its full context so you can understand the gravity of the problem we're facing, because we can't pretend like this isn't connected to other issues in the United States of America. And there's a concerted effort by people in the media, by tech platforms, to prevent you from seeing this kind of on-the-ground reporting. Savannah Hernandez does a lot of great work. She's broken a lot of major news stories, and her reward for doing this time and time again has been getting banned off of social media platforms, being restricted. She has entire videos talking about how every time she broke a major story on Twitter, she ended up losing that Twitter account without any legitimate justification. There's a lot of people on this platform and on other social media platforms who will tell you time and time again that because they got less views on this particular video or whatever, that they're somehow being suppressed by the social media companies. A lot of that is dramatically overstated, but this is not the case with Savannah Hernandez. This is somebody who has broken multiple different national news stories, has gotten amazing footage time and time again, including an interview with the one athlete who is willing to speak out against Leah Thomas, and she's been punished for it over and over again.
During the 2022 NCAA Women's Swimming Championships, I interviewed the one athlete that was willing to speak out against Leah Thomas, the transgender athlete that was competing. This interview went viral, garnering almost 3 million views and made Tucker Carlson's show. 2 days later, the account was suspended.
If not for the suppression, Savannah would likely be a household name across multiple different platforms, and considering that she's going out in the field and doing the work, collecting this firsthand original reporting, all this footage, and that is all very cost prohibitive, this actually has an effect on her reporting. You can't let people like Savannah that go out on the ground, spend the money, put the work in for very little return, hang out to dry, because people like me who do commentary based on that footage, who have relatively low cost comparatively, need people like Savannah to go out and do the reporting. That reporting was the whole inspiration for this piece. That's what got me interested in looking up how many people are entering our country illegally, how many people the Biden administration is letting into the nation, how we're going to have about 2 million illegal entries in this nation this year, and that is a continuous pattern of the Biden administration that will not be changed until we change border enforcement policy, which will likely have to be changed by changing who the president is. So yeah, do yourself a favor and go over to Savannah Hernandez's YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, follow her on Instagram, and if you are financially able to do so, figure out a way to support her work, because without people like her on the ground, all of us commentators are severely damaged. Without her original reporting, we all suffer, and the mainstream gets to pick the parameters of debate because they can essentially defund anybody that they disagree with through the mechanisms that are these social media companies. You need to stand up to this. And by the way, it's not just me, it's not just this channel that is reliant and appreciates on-the-ground reporting from people like Savannah Hernandez and Savannah in particular. I wasn't going to do this, I wasn't going to drop this on you, but you leave me no choice because not enough of you have been subscribing based on my community tab posts, so now I'm gonna have to use my #1 bullet to convince you to go over there. Here is a clip of Elijah Schaffer crying because Savannah Hernandez is leaving her producer role over at his show Slightly Offensive.
And it turns out that this may be Savannah's last episode, period. And I'm gonna try not to get sad because it's like, sucks, but...
Stop. We are 2 minutes into this. You're not allowed to cry yet. You're not allowed to. No.
It's been fun getting punched by poor black people and having you make fun of me.
That's right, I went there. I showed you a grown man crying over Savannah leaving just so you could imagine how you're gonna feel when Savannah Hernandez gets her YouTube channel deleted and you didn't take the opportunity to support and back up her coverage. You're all going to be grown men crying over her leaving unless you go over and subscribe right now. We just heard about hundreds of thousands of people crossing the border into our country thanks to Savannah, so I think it's only reasonable for hundreds, if not thousands of you guys to go cross the border and subscribe to her channel. Otherwise, you're gonna be crying just like Elijah Schaffer. I will play more of that clip. Don't think I won't. Here it goes.
It's okay, Lige. I feel like there are a lot of other people that you could replace me with that could be equally, if not more, diverse.
Yes, yes.
Now that's really all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you think about the border crossings in the United States of America. Do you think it's weird how this story kind of just fell out of favor by the mainstream media? Or do you think that it is deliberately being ignored and suppressed in order to direct your attention away from it because this ongoing crisis is something that is incredibly embarrassing and damaging to the Biden administration? Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like. Subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social media, support me, and support Savannah Hernandez. All the links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about the crisis at the border. Till next time.